At Harvard Law School, I took labor law from Archibald Cox, who was, I don't think if you can remember him, he was actually a terrible teacher. But the one thing I can remember from that is collective bargaining. If a union is duly formed and elected, it has the right to bargain for its contracts with a representative group. And we have collective bargaining with our unions in Alameda. The current memorandum of understanding that we have runs through June 2030. Change anything in that agreement without going through collective bargaining again, which I support. But even under the current memorandum of understanding, it requires parties to bargain over modifications in the event of a declaration of financial hardship. Nobody really knows what financial hardship requires to make that declaration. But it does require unions to come forward in good faith if the other side of the bargain in Alameda says we are in a situation of financial hardship. But if we aren't in a situation of financial hardship, our next round of negotiations could include the following. First of all, CalPERS, which covers most of our pension obligations, requires or allows us to ask the employees to contribute up to 14%. We had previously been at 9%, and the previous round of negotiations it went up to 11%, but there's still room for an additional 3%, and so that could be another important bargaining chip in the negotiations. We can ask them to contribute more. Second, we can get employees and ask them to share in the cost of the retiree health plans. Right now, the city picks up the entire tab for health benefits. And finally, we can ask in the next round of negotiations to adopt a two-tier system. That's where you have one set of pensions and rights for health care for existing employees and, of course, the people who've already retired, and you have a second program altogether for the newly hired, which, frankly, one person talked to me about them and called them the unborn, which was a weird definition. But again, you can do that. And those are the things that we have available to us, but we cannot, and people who think that we can go in and just say, we're going to reduce the cost of our pensions and we're going to make them take less, we can't. It's subject to collective bargaining.
Good evening. There are three key elements to the pension issue here in the city of Alameda. The first two have to do with the formulas, and the third has to do just with the discrete sum of unfunded liabilities and pensions and retirement, post-retirement health costs that we have. In terms of the first formulas, right now the formulas, we have certain formulas in place that identify the amount of dollars that persons are going to get in terms of their retirement after they work for the city of Alameda. So one of the formulas, for example, for that is 3% at 50 for the public safety workers, or new public safety workers. For current public safety workers, we're going to honor whatever contract we have in place and seek changes as well. But for new public worker systems, we're going to have to move away from the 3% at 50 because it's just, at this point, it's what's really driving our unfunded liabilities on the retirement side. So we have to enter into a two-tier system when it comes to identifying the amount of dollars that we need to set aside ultimately for each individual worker when they retire. Now, the second set of formulas has to do with how much people contribute into their pensions. People who are outside of police and fire contribute roughly 8.8% of their salaries towards their own retirement. People who are in public safety contribute 11% towards their retirement. Now, recently, the state of California passed Jerry Brown's pension reform. Now, one of the great things about the pension reform law that was passed was that if the public sector unions don't come to an agreement as to how we're going to change those contribution rates, whether it's 11% goes north to 12% or 13%, whatever, or whether for the non-public safety 8% goes to 9% or 10%, whatever. If in 5 years the public safety unions don't agree to change the way in which they contribute towards their the city of Alameda and cities can impose a 14% 50-50 contribution, meaning they can go as high as 14%, and the city will match that with a 14% contribution. So we've got a hammer in our back pocket in terms of bringing down, dealing with the unfunded liabilities. Because at the end of the day, ultimately, our unfunded liability on the retirement side is $95 million that we have to find to pay for not just current workers, but workers who are retired. And on the health side, it's roughly $90 million as well. So we've got $200 million in unfunded liability that we have to deal with. And by changing these formulas and doing other things, we can begin to address it. Thank you.
Okay. The pension. Yes, she's right. We have an MOU that will not expire until summer of next year. We are bound by law to honor the MOU. We're bound by law to honor all the defined benefits that we have and all the concessions that we've defined to not just a public safety employee, but the miscellaneous employees as well. Unfunded liabilities, we really don't know how much is there, but there's OPEB and pension benefits. It could be upwards in $100 million. But it didn't happen overnight. This happened through a series of bad luck or misfortune, from the banking trust, the real estate trust, the internet trust, the real estate trust. So Congress and our assets are dwindling. And that's how it created this huge unfunded liabilities. As far as how to tackle the issue, we have OPEB that we are making $2 million a year contribution. We are making contribution to our pension. But is it enough? Maybe, maybe not. But there's this huge unfunded liability that we have to deal with. And at the moment, what we need to do is either wait until our MOU expires and go back to the table, and either we negotiate and be honest, be earnest in our negotiation with our public safety employees and miscellaneous employees. But at the moment, I guess by the grace of God or the stars lining up, the state pension reform came into, well, it hasn't been effective yet. It was approved 2 weeks ago. So a lot of our decisions are not going to be tailored upon state pension reform. Yes, there's going to be a two-tiered system where the new hire and the current hire will have two different benefit packages. Yes, there will be a different contribution package as far as public safety employees who are 350. It could be reduced to 2.5 to 57 or 2.7 to 57. Even that small drop will save the city millions of dollars. So right now, our hands are tied. There's a lot of things that we can do, so we want to do it, but we can't do it because the state has now reformed the pension. And I believe that we have to be, it's an honor system. It's not just because we're bound by law, but we made an agreement with our employees, our public employees, and I believe that we have to honor it. If we can't afford it, then we go back and look at it at the end of our next contract period and see if we can come to a mutually agreeable solution. And I believe that public safety employees and the miscellaneous employees have our benefits of opportunity. They do not want a bankrupt system, and nobody wants to bankrupt our city. And we're all in this together, and we can find a solution together as well. Thank you very much.
So I've heard a lot of numbers, and is it 3 at 50? Is it 2.5 at 57? How are we going to solve this? And the purpose behind collective bargaining is to get stakeholders into the room, identify what the interests are, and then have those parties work together. And as a council member, we're not one of those parties. We have a city manager who's the one who's supposed to do that for us. We send him guidance, and then he goes in and decides what it is. I have talked to our public safety unions. Nobody is interested in bankrupting the city. And I don't think we're anywhere near that. And I think it's a little disingenuous when people mention $100 million or $200 million in unfunded liability, because that's not what it is on an annual basis. We don't have to come up with $100 million tomorrow. So now, I don't know exactly what it is, and I don't know exactly what the solutions are going to be. But our city manager now has a task force, and they're getting ready to release a report. And that task force had all of the stakeholders in the room. It had the actuarials in the room, it had people from the union, and it had city employees there, management. And I'm going to wait until that report comes out, because those were the interests and those were the stakeholders. And we'll find out where they agree, and we'll find out where they disagree. And at that point, then we have our work cut out for us, and it's going to be well defined. But it's not $900 million. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me say a couple things at the outset. I am, not only did I practice labor law, I am the daughter of a man who was a union president my entire growing up years. The city manager is designated as the principal representative in employer-employee relationships in the city. And it's John Russo, we have a man as our city manager now. He takes his direction from the city council, meets and confers with them in the course of negotiations. What I know, because John Russo very graciously agreed to meet and have coffee with each of the city council candidates so we could be brought up to speed, up to date on these issues. I know that John Russo has already been in conversation with our public safety unions, with police and fire, even though, as has already been mentioned, their contracts don't come up for renewal until next summer. So both sides are coming voluntarily to the table. This is a good thing, and it requires goodwill on both sides. And I just want to caution, and we're all Democrats, so we get this, there is nothing to be gained from attacking unions for a couple of reasons. It misplaces the responsibility for this problem, and it doesn't bring us any closer to a solution, because you tell me, if you didn't have to come to the bargaining table, would you be more motivated to do so because someone was insulting you and questioning your integrity? And when I've talked to members of public safety, they get it. They understand that what's good for Alameda will ultimately be good for them. We don't want to go the way of Vallejo. We don't want to go the way of Stockton. And I will also mention, because there's a lot of women in this room, but I think the men get it too, some of the most vociferous attacks on unions in this country have come from Wisconsin, which is also where you're hearing a lot of talk from people who don't think women have the right to make choices about their own bodies. So just consider the source. But anyway, some of the things that I know are being talked about is possibly having a longer contract term going forward, because then you're spending more time working out the details and also factoring in things like when the economy gets better. Not if, but when. It's going to get better, but slowly, especially if we re-elect the president. That there may be concessions. We did this with the nurses' unions when I was with the hospital. Remember, I led the campaign to save Alameda Hospital. It took working with the unions who were skeptical. Really, you're just doing this because you don't want to give us raises. We opened our books. We said, look, we understand you've gone without raises. We can't give you raises now. Work with us. As things get better, we will work with you. It took trust and goodwill on both sides, and we did it. So what I would say, and by the way, if you followed the news, I think just today Governor Brown signed a bill. He didn't get everything he wants, but that's called a compromise. But among other things, public safety unions are going to agree to a later retirement age and a little more retirement benefit sharing. So these are the sorts of things that should be on the table, are on the table, and can be talked about. And I feel confident that we can come to a productive resolution for all sides. Thank you.